I'm joined now by two colleagues from the Parliamentary Press Gallery to discuss some of the key stories of the day. Marieke Walsh is a reporter with the Globe and Mail. John Ivison is a columnist with the National Post and Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Postmedia. Good to see you both. Marieke, let me start with you. The Liberals and New Democrats spoke out in defense of abortion rights today in the wake of this news of this draft ruling leaked from the U.S. Supreme Court suggesting the court's about to overturn Roe versus Wade. But Conservatives were largely silent about this today, and you broke this story this morning. What can you tell us about why they're not talking and what might be behind that?
Well, it's just a topic they don't really like to touch, Peter, and that's because they are dealing with many different factions within their party, including social conservatives. And it means that they have a more tricky line that they walk on abortion. They say that they would not introduce any legislation restricting abortion if they form government, but they also allow free votes on it. And we know that interim leader Candice Bergen has previously described herself as pro-life. All
right. John, what are your thoughts on why Conservatives don't want to talk about this now and how this potential ruling, and we should be clear about that, potential ruling in the United States could affect the Conservative leadership race and how it could be framed by the party's opponents?
Yeah, well, I mean, going back as far as I can remember, every time the subject comes up, the Conservatives get themselves into hot water on the issues of conscience, particularly abortion. I do think that it's wise for them. There's such a divergence of opinion within the Conservative caucus, unlike the Liberal and NDP caucuses, because we know that when Justin Trudeau came in, he made it pretty clear to his caucus, if you were going to run for them, you had to be pro-choice. There were a few pro-lifers still left in the caucus, but they pretty much have kept their heads down or they've left. So there's a pretty singular view within the NDP and the Liberal parties, which is not the case, obviously, in the Conservative Party. As far as the leadership race, I mean, we have a declared candidate, Leslyn Lewis, who is clearly stated pro-lifer. I'm not particularly sure what Charest's policy is. I would imagine it's probably pro-choice. And Pierre Poilievre, although he plays quite well with some social conservatives, is got a green light from the Campaign Life, a red light from the Campaign Life folks. They don't particularly like his stance.
Yeah, they say he's evolved his views from over time, and they don't side with him anymore.
Yeah, so I think there is going to be a backlash against this, particularly in the US, obviously, but I think also in Canada, and therefore you probably better keep your head down if you are pro-life at the moment, to be honest.
What are your thoughts on that, Marieke, and how this could play out? Again, we should be clear, this is a draft decision, and there is an opportunity for this to change over time, but it certainly raised alarm bells for the pro-choice movement in the United States and to some extent in Canada as well.
Certainly, and I think the bottom line is it's not good timing for the Conservatives. The Supreme Court in the United States is expected to release its final decision by June. So for the next 2 months, possibly, we're going to have this issue come up every time it comes up in the U.S. and whether it even just continues now in Canada. Jean Charest told us today or his campaign, told us today that he is pro-choice, but that he would not whip the vote or prevent private members' bills from coming forward if he formed a Conservative government, which goes exactly to John's point, right? The other parties have made their lives easier in a sense by whipping the vote. The Conservatives have chosen not to, which is why they have a more challenging time addressing this issue, given the mainstream perspective in Canada. But we know today, for example, Liberal MP McKay said in scrums on the way into the House of Commons that he believes that life begins at conception. And so, there are still some Liberals as well or at least one, I should say, who is not in line with Justin Trudeau.
John, on the leadership race, in fundraising and caucus support and polling, Pierre Poilievre seems to be well ahead of the other candidates for the Conservative leadership. Debates are coming up. The first one this Thursday in Ottawa. It's not one of the official party debates, but they'll be on the stage together. What will you be watching for as this race moves forward now to see where this story is going?
Well, I think, Poilievre is the prohibitive favourite. The only scenario I could see where he doesn't win is that if Patrick Brown, for example, gets knocked off the ballot and endorses Jean Charest and all of his supporters go. Now, obviously, we've seen this before, that it doesn't really matter what a candidate says to recommend. Members are going to vote the way they're going to vote. But it does seem that Charest and Brown are aligned, and if one or other fell off and made it clear that they would prefer their supporters to go to the other, that could be a scenario in which Charest, I think, would be the favourite to pip Poilievre. I mean, given the fact that only two of them speak French, it seems to me it's a Poilievre versus Charest race. Unfortunately, I believe Patrick Brown is not going to be at this debate on Thursday,
not so far. Yeah,
it's kind of unfortunate because I think the dynamic. I think we could see a bit of a pile-on with Brown and Charest, and possibly even people like Scott Aitchison, who I think has some disagreements with the way Poilievre has been campaigning. So it's all to play for still. We've still got a lot of months and a lot of memberships to sell still.
Marieke, what are your thoughts? What are you watching for as this race moves forward?
Well, I'm constantly reminded, Peter, that the last two leaderships for the Conservatives have not led to the presumptive frontrunner actually winning. So I think it's just a good reminder for how messy these ranked ballots can be to predict, and how how many different things are going on behind the scenes when people are jockeying for that down ballot support. Certainly, I think the debate will give us a sense of the dynamics, how much they are attacking Poilievre versus other candidates. And I was speaking with some Conservatives today who are very concerned that their party is not governable, and that issues like this abortion question that is being brought up with the U.S. Supreme Court just highlight how difficult it is to manage this party, to manage the different factions and keep it all together. And they are skeptical whether it still is possible.
Okay, let's turn to a Conservative in this country who's had a little bit more success. Let's talk about the Ontario election, John. It's underway. It's an Ontario election, but it could have an effect on federal politics too, one might think. If Doug Ford wins again, is there a message there for the federal Conservatives on, in fact, what it takes to win more seats in Ontario? And for the federal Liberals who've tacked left with the deal with the federal NDP, and could there be a message there, and whether some of the seats in that province, Liberal seats, could be in peril because of that?
Well, a lot of ground there, but I think that clearly if Ford wins convincingly, then that kind of moderate G-shucks kind of conservatism that Ford specialises in is obviously resonating. I mean, I bet he was glad that Justin Trudeau was at his unofficial campaign launch yesterday at the car plant, right. The former Chrysler electric vehicle announcement. Both seem to be quite comfortable with that arrangement. I mean, we know that Ontario quite often likes a federal government of one flavour and a provincial government of another. There does not seem to be an upsurge of opinion that wants to boot Doug Ford right now. It seems to me that he's going to cruise quite comfortably and probably under the radar. I don't think they're going to put him out front very often. Straight back into another majority right now. I mean, the Liberals have not really been able to, the provincial Liberals have not really been able to disrupt that pattern, it seems to me.
Let me hear finally from you, Marieke, on that, on sort of how you think, the sort of things we've talked about and sort of implications in the Ontario race for the federal politics.
I think John's right. The sense in Ontario seems to be that this is Doug Ford's to win or lose, depending on how you want to frame it, that he is really the man to beat. I think the question is, do we see the opposition or the no Ford vote coalesce around the NDP or the Liberals? If that does happen, then he's up for a bigger challenge, I think. But if it remains split between the NDP and the Liberals, then that's where you see that opportunity for the Progressive Conservatives to win another government. And certainly the dynamic could not be more different from 4 years ago when he was running the first time and targeting Kathleen Wynne and Justin Trudeau. Now he and Trudeau are apparently the best of buds, and party stripes don't matter.
All right, Marieke Walsh, John Ivison, thank you both for your time tonight. Good to see you again. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.